Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for another deep dive.
Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to this one.
Yeah, we are thrilled to have you sitting down with us today. We often think of fiction and, especially the romance genre as just pure escapism.
Right. The literary equivalent of a warm bath.
Exactly. Or a heavy, cozy blanket. You read it to tune out the noise of the real world, to give your brain a break from the relentless news cycle.
And just the demands of daily life.
Yeah. But today, we are going to extract some incredibly profound, highly applicable, real-world insights from a source that many might dismiss as just a fun weekend read.
Which is a huge mistake, by the way.
It is.
Yay.
We are going to look at the mechanics of starting over, the ways we navigate deeply rooted trauma,
Yeah.
and the complex sociology of community.
It's a phenomenal text for this kind of analysis. The insights hidden within the narrative structure are surprisingly robust when you actually hold them up to the light. The author utilizes these familiar tropes, but weaponizes them to explore human behavior in a way that is immediately applicable to your everyday life.
So the source material we are dissecting today is the novel Whisper Sweet Nothings.
Yes.
It's Rosewood River Series Book 6 by Laura Pavlov.
Such a great installment in that series.
It really is. And to give you a sense of the landscape we are operating in today, let me just lay out the core premise. We are following a protagonist named Winnie Smith,
Who is 24.
24 years old,
Yeah.
and she has recently finalized a divorce, packed up whatever was left of her shattered life in Chicago, and moved to the picturesque small town of Rosewood River.
Looking for a completely blank slate.
Completely blank. And to pay the bills and keep a roof over her head while she recalibrates, she takes a part-time job as a nanny.
Right.
Her new employer is a man named Archer Chadwick. He's a wealthy, highly analytical, and incredibly successful commercial real estate broker.
But more importantly,
Yes, more importantly, he is a fiercely protective single father to a 5-year-old girl named Melody.
and while you might initially pick up this book for the romance aspect, like the classic nanny and single dad dynamic.
Which is very well done, by the way.
How it is. But what really deserves our attention is how Laura Pavlov uses that specific framework to explore deeply entrenched psychological themes.
Yeah, we are looking at the lingering, often insidious effects of emotional abuse on a person's baseline self-worth.
We're examining the defensive, almost fortress-like mechanisms that single parents construct to shield themselves.
And their children.
Exactly, shield their children from further abandonment. And we're also going to delve into the secret, compartmentalized lives that creative individuals often feel forced to lead.
To protect their art from a judgmental environment. Okay, let's unpack this. I want to start by looking at the concept of showing up when absolutely everything in the universe is signaling that you should quit.
The disastrous interview.
The disastrous interview. The way Winnie and Archer initially meet sets the psychological stage for their entire dynamic. And it happens through what has to be, truly the most chaotic job interview imaginable.
It serves as a brilliant character study because it strips away all the performative aspects of a standard job interview.
You can't rehearse for this.
No, you can't. It forces both characters to react to raw, unmitigated chaos.
Chaos is the perfect word for it. So Winnie is driving to her interview at Archer's brokerage firm. And it is pouring rain in Rosewood River.
Not just a drizzle.
A torrential downpour. She's driving this piece of junk vintage Mustang, and it completely breaks down on a rural country road.
About a mile outside of the downtown area.
Right, and she has absolutely zero cell service.
Which is a nightmare.
Total nightmare. Now, in that scenario, the logical move for most people is to stay in the car, right? Wait for the rain to stop, or wait for someone to drive by and flag them down.
The interview is essentially a lost cause at that point.
But Winnie pops an umbrella and just starts walking down the shoulder of the road.
Which demonstrates an immediate refusal to accept a passive role in her own crisis.
Yeah.
She is actively choosing discomfort over stagnation.
And the universe immediately punishes her for that choice. A truck speeds past her, hits a massive puddle, and absolutely douses her favorite cream-colored dress pants in filthy brown street water.
Of course they were cream-colored.
Right. And then it gets worse. Her heel catches in a pothole. She wipes out completely on the wet asphalt, tears a massive hole in her pants, and scrapes her knee so badly that it begins actively bleeding down her leg.
So she is soaked.
Soaked, covered in mud, in physical pain, and her professional attire is completely ruined.
The culmination of those events is fascinating from a psychological standpoint. We often talk about the concept of learned helplessness.
Where you just sort of give up.
Exactly, where an individual experiences repeated adverse events and eventually simply stops trying to avoid them, believing they have no control over their environment.
And Winnie is experiencing a concentrated barrage of adverse events right there on the shoulder of the road.
The psychological weight of the broken car, the ruined clothes, the physical injury, and the impending failure of the job interview, it could easily trigger that learned helplessness. She could just sit down on the side of the road and cry.
But she doesn't. She keeps walking. She physically walks through the front doors of Chadwick Brokerage. She stands in the reception area of a highly professional, pristine commercial real estate office, shivering,
Leaving a puddle of muddy water on the floor.
with blood running down her shin.
And this is where we have to analyze Archer's response, because Archer brings her into his immaculate cherrywood office. He doesn't dismiss her or tell her to reschedule.
He actually pulls out a first aid kit.
Yes. He meticulously cleans and bandages her knee himself. And then, despite her admitting she has zero professional nanny experience, he hires her.
That on the spot.
We have to ask why a successful, hyper-analytical businessman makes that specific decision. He's looking for someone to care for his most prized possession.
His daughter.
Why entrust her to a woman who just arrived looking like she survived a shipwreck?
Because he isn't looking at her resume. He's looking at her resilience.
Exactly. He is evaluating her character through the metric of tenacity. Archer operates in a high-stakes business environment. He knows that technical skills can be taught, but grit is intrinsic.
You either have it or you don't.
He observes the physical toll of her mourning. He processes the obstacles, the weather, the mechanical failure, the ruined garments, the laceration, and he recognizes that her default response to overwhelming friction is forward motion.
Forward motion. I love that phrasing.
He correctly deduces that if she possesses the internal fortitude to walk into a formal interview in that condition, she possesses the emotional endurance to handle the inevitable difficulties of caring for a young child.
She isn't going to abandon her responsibilities when the situation becomes uncomfortable.
Precisely.
And that physical resilience is a direct manifestation of what she has had to build internally. Because as awful as that walk in the rain was, it pales in comparison to the psychological storm she just walked away from in Chicago.
We need to look at Winnie's backstory to understand why that forward motion is so critical to her survival. The physical storm is a very deliberate mirror of her recent emotional history.
So Winnie is fresh off a divorce from her high school sweetheart, a man named Jaden. And Jaden is a textbook emotional abuser. But it's the specific methodology of his abuse that is so damaging.
He didn't just casually put her down.
No, he systematically dismantled her self-worth. He deemed her a failure. He constantly mocked her aspirations. And the most egregious part of this dynamic is that when she actually started achieving financial success through her writing,
Which we will explore in depth shortly.
right, when she started earning money, he felt completely entitled to spend the money she was earning, while simultaneously telling her on a daily basis that her success was a fluke and she was destined to fail.
It's infuriating.
He took her apartment, he took her furniture, and he tried to take her fundamental belief in her own competence.
What you are describing is a textbook example of coercive control and the incremental erosion of identity.
Yeah.
When an individual is partnered with someone who acts as a perpetual headwind, where every single achievement is minimized and every flaw is magnified, they develop deep internal scarring. The abuser's voice essentially becomes the victim's internal monologue.
So insidious.
The cognitive dissonance of Jaden spending her money while calling her a failure is designed to keep her off balance and dependent. Winnie's self-doubt early in the narrative is a highly realistic portrayal of someone emerging from that specific type of systemic psychological dismantling.
So how does someone counteract that internalized voice? Because Winnie does something incredibly specific to fight back against that internal scarring, and it involves a physical reminder of her own value.
The bows.
The bows. Throughout the entire story, Winnie wears ribbons or silk bows in her hair every single day, regardless of the outfit.
It's such a distinct character choice.
And later in the narrative, she and Archer are sharing a late-night bowl of mint chocolate chip ice cream in his kitchen, and he finally asks her about the bows. She shares a memory from when she was a little girl.
Her mother had just walked out on the family.
Abandoned them completely. Winnie was devastated, severely depressed, and couldn't even find the motivation to get out of bed. Her father, Sam Smith, who is this stoic, hardworking mechanic, came into her room. He had just gotten Winnie's name tattooed directly over his heart.
A permanent physical anchor.
He explained to his daughter that whenever he felt overwhelmed by sadness or the weight of the world, he would look at her name on his chest, and it acted as his superpower.
He anchored himself to his core purpose.
Yes, and he realized a young child couldn't get a tattoo to serve that same function. So Sam went to the store and brought Winnie a collection of ribbons and bows. He told her that she needed her own superpower token.
Her armor.
She started wearing the bows as her armor. Whenever she felt the creeping sensation of weakness or the lingering trauma of her mother's abandonment, the physical sensation of the bow in her hair served as a tangible reminder of her innate strength and the indisputable fact that she was loved by her father.
Let's break down the mechanics of that using the framework of cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT.
Oh, interesting. Let's do it.
What Sam Smith instinctively taught his daughter is a form of a grounding technique. In CBT, grounding techniques are used to pull a person away from distressing thoughts, memories, or emotional pain and anchor them in the present reality.
Okay.
Winnie is using the bow as a psychological talisman. When the internalized voice of her mother's abandonment, or later, Jaden's emotional abuse, starts to overwhelm her cognitive processes, the physical reality of the bow interrupts that thought pattern.
It breaks the loop.
Yes, it forces her brain to recall the specific memory of her father's love and the instruction to be strong. It is a highly effective way to signal resilience to oneself.
It makes you wonder how many people is walking around with their own version of that armor. Think about the subtle things people do or wear when they know they're walking into a difficult environment.
Exactly.
Like a specific piece of jewelry worn only for major presentations, a particular song played in the car before a stressful family event, even a specific brand of coffee that signals the start of a productive day.
These aren't just quirks.
They are necessary psychological props. Winnie is demonstrating that resilience isn't just a state of mind. Sometimes it requires a physical object to remind the nervous system of what the spirit has already survived.
It is a profound coping mechanism. But it is also important to contrast Winnie's visible, delicate armor with the defensive structures built by the other characters.
You mean Archer?
While Winnie uses a bow to remind herself to stay open and strong, Archer is utilizing a very different kind of armor. He has constructed an impenetrable emotional fortress. Which brings us to the complex psychology of the single parent and the intensely frustrating dynamic of pushing away the exact thing you desire.
Let's examine Archer Chadwick's defensive strategy. His entire life is structured around his 5-year-old daughter, Melody. But the absence of Melody's mother is the defining feature of his psychological landscape.
Scarlet.
She came to Rosewood River a few years prior to work remotely. She and Archer dated, it was casual, and she ended up pregnant. Scarlett quickly realized that a quiet family life in a small town was the exact opposite of what she wanted.
Her priority was a high-powered, fast-paced career in New York City.
She stayed in Rosewood River just long enough to ensure a safe delivery, but literally the day after giving birth to Melody, she packed her bags and moved back to New York. They drafted a strict, legal, no-contact agreement. Archer's been raising this child entirely on his own since her first day on Earth.
We need to understand the concept of compartmentalization to understand Archer. Compartmentalization is a subconscious psychological defense mechanism where a person mentally separates conflicting thoughts, emotions, or experiences into distinct, isolated boxes.
To avoid the anxiety.
To avoid the anxiety or cognitive dissonance they would cause if they interacted. Archer has taken his capacity for profound, unconditional love and locked it entirely inside the fatherhood compartment.
He is an exceptional parent.
Incredible parent. He provides security, routine, and deep affection for Melody. But he has taken his romantic desires, his vulnerability, and his fear of abandonment and locked them in a separate, heavily reinforced vault.
Because he views romantic attachment as a direct threat to his daughter's stability. He watched the biological mother of his child walk away without a second glance.
The trauma of Scarlett's departure isn't just about his own heartbreak. It is about the existential threat of instability. Archer's primary fear is not that a woman will abandon him. He is a self-sufficient, wealthy adult who can handle rejection.
Right.
His paralyzing fear is that a woman will integrate into their lives, become a maternal figure to Melody, and then abandon them, subjecting his daughter to the trauma of maternal loss for a second time.
And then Winnie Smith walks into his house. Winnie is 24 years old, which is a full decade younger than Archer. She is vibrant. She forms an immediate and beautiful bond with Melody, And the physical and emotional chemistry between Winnie and Archer is undeniable.
But instead of seeing this as a positive development, Archer's internal alarm system goes off.
Red flashing lights everywhere.
As he learns more about Winnie, specifically her hidden talents and the fact that she has her entire life ahead of her, he begins to superimpose Scarlett's trajectory onto Winnie's future.
He convinces himself that because Winnie is young and talented, she will inevitably realize that Rosewood River is too small for her.
He believes her departure is a mathematical certainty. He is projecting past trauma onto a present reality. He is taking the specific actions of one woman, Scarlett, and applying them as a universal law of human behavior to another woman, Winnie.
This projection creates an agonizingly tense dynamic throughout the narrative. You have these moments of incredible intimacy that are immediately followed by extreme emotional withdrawal.
The hot and cold.
Exactly. For instance, Archer notices that Winnie spends her free time writing. He doesn't just offer her a corner of the kitchen table. He actively tracks down a specific vintage printer's desk at an antique store.
It's such a thoughtful gesture.
He buys it, brings it to his home, paints a spare room in her favorite color, and builds her a customized writing sanctuary. It's an extraordinary act of service and support. He's physically building a space for her dreams to flourish.
But the very next day, his panic about her eventual departure sets in, and he initiates a campaign of emotional distancing.
Constantly reminding her that he is too old for her.
The age gap becomes his preferred weapon of self-sabotage. It is a fabricated, logical-sounding barrier that he uses to mask his deeply irrational fear of abandonment.
And he pushes it to absurd extremes. He actually encourages her to go on dates with other men. There is a character named Brenner Layton, an executive assistant who works for Archer's cousin. Brenner openly flirts with Winnie and asks her out.
Right in front of Archer.
Archer is standing right there, visibly jealous, practically grinding his teeth into dust. Yet he forces himself to tell Winnie that she should accept the date.
And then the New Year's Eve party.
Oh, the New Year's Eve party. Later in the story, there is this massive party. Archer refuses to attend because he's aggressively trying to maintain his emotional boundaries. Winnie goes to the party, and a professional hockey player begins hitting on her.
And Archer finds out.
Archer finds out. And he is so consumed by jealousy that he literally drives to the party to intervene. He is the one who pushed her to go mingle, yet he cannot tolerate the reality of her actually doing it.
What we are observing is the paradox of the traumatized brain trying to manage risk. Archer is attempting to orchestrate what we might call a controlled burn.
Like in forestry.
Exactly. In forestry, a controlled burn is a fire intentionally set to clear out underbrush, preventing a massive, uncontrollable wildfire later on. Archer is trying to initiate a controlled burn of his relationship with Winnie.
He pushes her toward other men, hoping to end the romantic potential on his own terms.
Thereby avoiding the catastrophic wildfire of her abandoning him and Melody years down the line. The flaw in his logic is that the controlled burn is still a fire, and the act of pushing her away causes him immediate, acute psychological pain.
He is torturing himself in the present to prevent a hypothetical pain in the future.
It is entirely counterproductive.
But we have to acknowledge that his hypervigilance regarding Melody isn't occurring in a vacuum. The world can be incredibly harsh to a child growing up in a non-traditional family structure. There is a specific incident in the novel that really highlights why Archer feels the need to maintain such heavy fortifications around his daughter.
The mean girl incident.
Yes, it involves a kindergarten classmate, a 5-year-old mean girl named Justine Schwartz.
That scene is a critical pivot point for the overarching themes of the narrative. It forces the internal anxieties of the adults out into the open through the actions of the children.
It takes place on Valentine's Day. Winnie and Melody have spent hours in the kitchen, meticulously baking and decorating these beautiful, elaborate cupcakes for Melody's kindergarten class party. They arrive at the school, and Justine, whose mother, ironically, is constantly trying to inappropriately flirt with Archer during school drop-offs, confronts Melody.
Justine looks this 5-year-old girl in the face
and tells her that she isn't special because she doesn't have a real mama. Justine doesn't stop there. She loudly announces to the entire classroom that nobody should eat the cupcakes because they weren't made by a real mommy.
It's brutal.
Melody is devastated. It escalates into a physical altercation, and Archer and Winnie are called into the principal's office.
We have to analyze the profound emotional regulation required from Archer and Winnie in that principal's office. The biological evolutionary instinct for any parent when their offspring is socially or physically attacked is to experience an amygdala hijack.
Fight or flight response.
Right. The amygdala floods the system with adrenaline and cortisol. The instinct is to react with unmitigated rage, to lash out at the cruel child, to demand retribution from the school administration, or to aggressively confront the other mother.
I would be absolutely livid. It feels almost unrealistic that a man as protective as Archer wouldn't just tear the room apart. How do they actually manage to suppress that level of anger?
They suppress it by prioritizing the child's prefrontal cortex development over their own emotional release. If Archer explodes in anger, the lesson Melody internalizes is that the situation is terrifying and unstable.
Oh, I see.
By regulating their own nervous systems, Archer and Winnie create a container for Melody's grief. They validate her feelings of hurt without validating the bully's premise. They don't make the incident about their own anger. They center Melody's emotional processing.
And the way Winnie handles the aftermath is what truly redefines the concept of family within this story. Later that night, while Melody's in the bathtub, still grappling with the shame Justine inflicted on her, Winnie sits down on the bathroom floor.
She doesn't offer hollow platitudes.
No, she delivers a deeply philosophical lesson about the nature of love. She explains to Melody that biological proximity does not equate to emotional value. She tells her, having a mama doesn't make you lovable. What's inside your heart makes you lovable.
It is a masterstroke of cognitive reframing. Winnie is taking the weapon Justine used, the definition of a real mother, and completely dismantling it. She is teaching Melody that family is not strictly a biological imperative. It is a behavioral consistency. By redefining the terms of engagement, she neutralizes the shame associated with abandonment.
And the subtext of that conversation is deafening. Winnie is speaking directly to Melody, but she is simultaneously speaking to Archer, who is undoubtedly listening from the hallway, and she is speaking to the traumatized little girl inside herself whose own mother walked away.
She is verbalizing the core thesis of the novel. We are defined by the love we cultivate, not by the bloodlines that fail us.
Furthermore, this incident solidifies their bond in a way that romantic chemistry never could. They navigate a profound parenting crisis together, proving to Archer that Winnie possesses the emotional fortitude to protect his daughter from the specific vulnerabilities of their family structure.
But while Winnie is actively healing the emotional wounds of the Chadwick household, she is harboring a massive, complex secret of her own.
She is leading a double life. This brings us to the exploration of the secret lives of creatives and the protective bunkers they build around their art.
The revelation of Winnie's hidden identity is the mechanism that connects her past trauma with her potential future.
So we know Winnie spends her free time locked in the vintage writing room Archer built for her. But she isn't just journaling her feelings or writing a hobby blog. Winnie Smith is secretly a rapidly rising star in the publishing industry.
She writes romance novels under the pseudonym Hannah Chase.
She has already published 2 incredibly successful books, and she is in the final stages of editing her 3rd. And in a fantastic piece of meta-narrative by the author, the title of Winnie's upcoming release is literally Whisper Sweet Nothings.
The use of the pseudonym is the critical element to analyze here. A pen name is often viewed simply as a marketing tool, but in Winnie's case, it functions as a psychological safe room. We have to look back at the environment she escaped.
Jaden.
Yes. When an individual possesses a creative drive, that drive requires an incubation period. It needs a safe environment to fail, to experiment, and to grow. Jaden provided the exact opposite. He created an environment of toxic suppression.
He recognized her talent, perceived it as a threat to his control, and systematically attacked it.
He called her early success a fluke. He weaponized her dreams against her. When a creative person's primary attachment figure continually signals that their art is fundamentally worthless, the creator learns to hide the art in the dark to ensure its survival.
Winnie didn't use a pen name to be mysterious. She used it to build an unbreachable wall between her fragile creative identity and her abusive reality.
She created a persona that Jaden couldn't touch.
But what happens when she brings that hidden identity into a healthy environment? The reveal to the town of Rosewood River is one of the most joyous sequences in the story. Winnie's aunt and uncle own the local Honey Biscuit Cafe.
And Winnie is invited to join a group of local women
who gather there for what they refer to as a boozy book brunch. You have this vibrant cast of characters, Lulu, Wren, Amelia, Eloise, and Henley. They're drinking mimosas, eating stacks of pancakes, and discussing literature.
They ask Winnie what she likes to read and write.
When she finally takes the leap and admits that she writes romance under the name Hannah Chase, the reaction is explosive. These women absolutely lose their minds. They are clutching their pearls, dropping their forks, squealing in the middle of the cafe.
It turns out this specific friend group constitutes a massive enclave of Hannah Chase superfans.
They have been desperately anticipating the release of Whisper Sweet Nothings, completely unaware that the author was sitting across the table eating French toast with them.
The contrast between Jaden's reaction to her art and the reaction of the boozy book brunch is stark and incredibly important. This group of women represents the anti-Jaden ecosystem.
The incubator community.
Yes, a sociological framework we might call an incubator community. Talent alone is rarely enough to sustain a long-term creative career. Talent requires the right soil. This community doesn't just tolerate her writing, they elevate it.
They demand early copies, they celebrate her milestones, and they aggressively validate her identity as a serious artist.
It completely shifts her internal narrative. She goes from protecting her work from a predator to sharing it with the cheering section.
And the story introduces an incredible parallel to Winnie's journey with a massive plot twist. Winnie is not the only person in her family utilizing a pseudonym to protect their creative output.
The revelation regarding her uncle Oscar adds a fascinating generational layer to the theme of the hidden artist.
It is brilliant. Winnie's uncle Oscar is the proprietor of the Honey Biscuit Cafe. He is presented as this mild-mannered, sweet, older gentleman who spends his days baking pies, serving coffee, and offering gentle smiles to the locals.
But Oscar is secretly James Covington.
For those unfamiliar with the universe of the book, James Covington is a retired, world-renowned New York Times best-selling author of visceral, high-stakes thriller novels.
He wrote 57 wildly successful books.
Amassed a fortune, and then simply vanished from the public eye, retiring to a small town to bake muffins. He has been Winnie's most steadfast cheerleader because he intimately understands the brutal realities and the immense pressures of the publishing industry.
We have two distinct generations of writers, both hiding in plain sight within the same small town, but their motivations for hiding are vastly different, which highlights the dual nature of creative protection.
Winnie hides out of fear.
She is protecting a fledgling career from trauma. Oscar hides out of fatigue. He is protecting his peace from the relentless demands of success and public consumption. He recognized that the machinery of fame was beginning to cannibalize his joy, so he constructed a quiet life as a shield.
It forces you to evaluate your own relationship with your passions. Think about it. How many people listening right now are hiding a talent, a hobby, or a deep interest because there was a Jaden in their past?
Someone who mocked their enthusiasm?
Who told them their art wasn't commercially viable, or who simply made them feel small for caring about something deeply. The narrative suggests that the antidote to that lingering shame is finding your own version of a boozy book brunch.
You have to actively seek out communities.
Whether they are physical groups, online forums, or just a few trusted friends. You need people who will act as an incubator rather than a suppressor.
That concept of finding your community transitions perfectly into the broader sociological landscape of the novel. The town of Rosewood River is not merely a backdrop. It functions as a complex, interconnected organism. We need to dissect the anatomy of the small-town ecosystem, specifically looking at how information flows and how it binds the residents together.
We have to talk about the Chadwick family group chat. The Chadwick men are a vast, incredibly tight-knit clan. The core communication hub is a continuous text thread featuring Archer, his brother Axel, and his cousins Bridger, Rafe, Easton, and Clark.
The dynamic within this group chat is a masterclass in modern male bonding. The banter is relentless.
They will spend hours engaged in highly technical, absurdly intense debates about things like the water pressure of a new turbo toilet installation.
Or viciously mocking Rafe's lactose intolerance.
But the moment Archer shows a fraction of emotional distress regarding Winnie, the tone shifts instantly. They transition from crude humor directly into delivering incredibly nuanced, highly effective relationship advice.
What we are observing is the utility of humor as a psychological pressure release valve among men. In many traditional male dynamics, direct emotional vulnerability is difficult to initiate.
The constant ribbing and the debates about turbo toilets serve to maintain continuous, low-stakes contact.
It keeps the channels of communication wide open. Because that baseline of constant contact is established through humor, when a genuine crisis arises, the infrastructure for support is already in place.
They don't have to awkwardly schedule a time to talk about their feelings.
They simply inject the emotional support into the existing stream of consciousness. It is a highly efficient, deeply loyal support system.
But the private group chat is only one mechanism of communication in Rosewood River. The macro-level communication happens through the Taylor T.
Ah, yes, the anonymous gossip column. This is where the sociological study of the town becomes truly fascinating.
The Taylor T is the local equivalent of a surveillance state, operating under the guise of a newspaper column. It is entirely anonymous, and it seemingly knows everything about everyone.
It exposes the mundane and the scandalous with equal fervor.
One week, it might report on a local mailman having a clandestine affair with a tourist, and the next week, it reports on Archer and Winnie having a quiet, cozy dinner at a steakhouse.
It essentially outs their budding romance to the entire population before they have even defined it themselves.
The town is completely divided on the column. Some find it highly entertaining, while others, like Archer's cousin Bridger, who is a billionaire tech genius who values his privacy above all else, absolutely despise it for airing their family's private matters.
From a sociological perspective, gossip columns, whether they are physical newspapers or modern digital equivalents, serve a distinct evolutionary function. Anthropologists have long posited that gossip evolved as a mechanism for tracking social capital and enforcing community norms in large groups where direct observation of every member is impossible.
The Taylor T is the panopticon of Rosewood River.
Exactly. It forces a baseline of behavioral compliance because the residents know they're always potentially being watched.
But the true genius of the column in this narrative is the revelation of its author. Bridger is planning an elaborate proposal for his girlfriend, Amelia. He enlists Winnie's help to format some documents, but his laptop crashes.
Winnie's Aunt Edith casually suggests that Winnie use Uncle Oscar's laptop.
And she hands the machine over to Bridger to run some diagnostics. Bridger, utilizing his extensive tech background, bypasses the security and begins digging through the hard drive. He uncovers hidden folders containing decades' worth of documents, all labeled the Taylor T.
Uncle Oscar, the sweet pie-baking cafe owner, the retired, world-famous thriller author James Covington, is the anonymous town gossip.
The implications of that revelation are staggering. You have a man who reached the absolute pinnacle of global literary success, a man who constructed complex, multi-layered thrillers, spending his twilight years anonymously writing about cheating mailmen.
The immediate question is, why would he engage in such seemingly petty behavior?
Bridger is livid. He is pacing the room, demanding an explanation, ready to expose Oscar to the entire town. Winnie is the one who steps in and explains the psychology behind her uncle's actions.
And her analysis is spot on. Our writer's brain is fundamentally wired for narrative observation. Oscar retired from the grueling machinery of the publishing industry, the deadlines, the press tours, the editors. But he could not turn off his innate desire to observe the human condition and synthesize those observations into a story.
He loves the drama of everyday life.
Writing the Taylor T allows him to keep his storytelling muscles actively engaged without the paralyzing pressure of commercial expectations. He gets to pull the strings of the town's narrative while maintaining his cherished anonymity.
But Winnie also points out that, despite its invasive nature, the column serves a vital function for the town itself. It acts as the social glue.
In an era marked by increasing isolation, the Taylor T provides Rosewood River with a shared, collective reality. It is the modern town square. Every Sunday morning, the entire population reads the same text.
It gives them a common baseline of information to discuss, debate, and react to.
Even when the citizens are complaining about the column, they are bonding over their shared annoyance. It forces the community to remain deeply intertwined.
And this revelation forces Bridger into a moment of profound character growth. His instinct is to destroy the column and expose Oscar, exacting revenge for the times the column invaded his own privacy. But Winnie, visibly emotional, begs him to keep the secret.
She explains that Oscar has been her lifeline, her mentor, and her safe harbor.
She asks Bridger to protect her uncle. And Bridger, looking at the woman who has brought so much light into his cousin Archer's life, agrees. He explicitly states that he is burying the secret because Winnie is now considered family.
Bridger's decision is a demonstration of loyalty overriding personal grievance. He consciously chooses to sacrifice his desire for vindication in order to protect the delicate ecosystem of his new family member. It's a powerful indicator of how thoroughly Winnie has been integrated into the Chadwick clan's protective perimeter.
The integration of Winnie into the family sets the stage for the final, most intense conflict of the novel. We have reached the climax, where Archer's past trauma violently collides with Winnie's future success. It is the ultimate battle between self-sabotage and the necessity of communication.
The inciting incident for this conflict is entirely positive, which is what makes Archer's reactions so devastatingly complex.
Winnie receives a call from her publisher that changes everything. Her Hannah Chase novels are suddenly exploding in popularity. They are going viral on social media platforms, pre-orders are breaking records, and her career is achieving terminal velocity.
The publisher decides to capitalize on this momentum by sending Winnie on a massive 3-week, multi-state book tour to promote the release of Whisper Sweet Nothings.
It is the realization of everything she has ever worked for. She is ecstatic. But that joy is immediately tempered by the profound anxiety of having to leave Melody and Archer for almost a month.
From a logical standpoint, Archer should be her biggest champion in this moment. But his traumatized nervous system interprets her impending success as a catastrophic threat. Consciously, he verbalizes his pride. Subconsciously, every alarm bell in his brain is screaming.
The 3-week tour, the massive influx of wealth and adulation, the expansion of her horizons. To Archer, this mirrors Scarlett's trajectory with terrifying precision.
His cognitive distortion equates her career explosion with the absolute certainty that she will outgrow their small-town life and abandon him and his daughter.
Instead of leaning in, he begins a systematic emotional withdrawal. As Winnie frantically packs for the tour, trying to manage her own anxiety, Archer becomes distant, cold, and transactional. The tension peaks during the chaotic drop-off at the airport.
They are standing on the curb, luggage is being unloaded, whistles are blowing, the environment is intensely stressful.
Winnie is overflowing with emotion, and right before she turns to walk through the sliding doors, she hurriedly, almost desperately, drops a "love ya" to Archer. It is the first time she has verbalized those words in the relationship.
And we must analyze Archer's physiological and psychological response to that declaration. He doesn't just fail to say it back. He experiences a complete freeze response.
The freeze response.
It's a core survival mechanism triggered when the brain perceives an inescapable threat. The threat, in this case, is the vulnerability of accepting her love while believing she is about to leave forever. He gives her a distant, non-committal nod and simply lets her walk away into the terminal.
Winnie boards her flight, completely devastated. She spends the first several days of what should be the most triumphant week of her life, sitting in luxurious hotel rooms, privately heartbroken, convinced that she entirely misread his feelings and the depth of their connection.
Archer's behavior is the ultimate manifestation of self-sabotage. He is actively destroying his present happiness and a misguided attempt to preemptively manage a future grief that hasn't even occurred. He creates the exact scenario he fears most.
Distance between himself and the woman he loves. But this is where the robust architecture of his community intervenes. Archer does not have the luxury of wallowing in his self-inflicted misery because the Chadwick men refuse to allow it. They recognize his destructive pattern, and they orchestrate what is essentially an emotional intervention.
Bridger physically forces Archer to sit down and speak with Dr. Debbie, a therapist who has previously worked with the family.
The intervention serves as an external conscience. When a person is trapped in a trauma loop, their internal logic is flawless to them, no matter how flawed it is to an outside observer. Dr. Debbie and the Chadwick men systematically dismantle Archer's cognitive distortions.
They force him to look at the empirical evidence rather than his projected fears.
They lay out the facts. Scarlett left, severed all ties,
Yeah.
and never looked back. Winnie, conversely, is currently in the middle of a grueling, multi-state media tour. She's exhausted, signing books for thousands of fans, sleeping in different cities every night. And yet she is still calling every single evening to read Melody a bedtime story.
She is actively coordinating Melody's upcoming cowgirl-themed birthday party via email from green rooms.
She is making superhuman efforts to maintain her connection to their family, despite the geographical distance and her professional obligations.
The therapeutic breakthrough occurs when Archer finally accepts that the two women are fundamentally different. The armor cracks because the empirical evidence of Winnie's devotion overpowers the theoretical fear of his past trauma.
He realizes that by attempting to shield himself from a hypothetical injury, he is bleeding to death from a self-inflicted wound.
He faces a binary choice: remain secure and isolated within his emotional fortress, or dismantle the walls and risk everything for the reality of her love.
And he chooses to dismantle the walls in the most spectacular way possible. He executes the grand gesture. Archer secures Bridger's private jet, flies through the night to New York City, and tracks down Winnie's hotel.
He shows up at her door holding a massive bouquet of pink roses.
Winnie opens the door, wearing her pajamas, looking exhausted, and is completely stunned. And in that moment, Archer finally utilizes the tool he has been avoiding the entire novel.
Clear, unequivocal communication.
He bypasses the defensive mechanisms. He doesn't just offer an apology, he offers context. He explains the root of his hot and cold behavior, articulates his paralyzing fear of abandonment, and then, most importantly, clearly states that his love for her is greater than his fear of the past.
He stays with her for the remainder of the book tour, standing quietly in the back of auditoriums, carrying her bags, and supporting her as a partner rather than a warden. He stops letting the ghosts of his past dictate the reality of his present.
It is the necessary resolution to his character arc. He achieves emotional maturity not by erasing his trauma, but by refusing to let it govern his actions.
The novel provides a deeply satisfying epilogue that solidifies these themes. The narrative jumps forward 1 year in time. Archer and Winnie are officially married, living happily in Rosewood River.
But the town is gathered for a massive celebration that has nothing to do with their wedding anniversary. They are celebrating because the complex legal paperwork has finally cleared the court system, and Winnie has officially legally adopted Melody.
She is no longer the nanny, and she is no longer just her father's wife. She is her mother. The Chadwick household is officially a family of 3.
That legal proceeding is the ultimate manifestation of the lesson Winnie taught Melody on the bathroom floor a year prior. Biology did not create that family. The consistent, deliberate choice to love and protect one another created that family.
The adoption is merely the legal system recognizing the emotional truth that already existed.
It is a beautiful conclusion to their specific journey. And Laura Pavlov, understanding the mechanics of a continuous fictional universe, provides a small teaser at the very end of the text. We get a glimpse into the dynamic between Melody's suave, slightly ridiculous little cousin, Cutler Beefcake Hart, and his best friend Gracie.
It signals to the reader that while Archer and Winnie's primary conflict is resolved, the interconnected world of Rosewood River continues to spin, promising more stories down the line.
As we synthesize the vast amount of material we have covered today, I believe there are 3 primary, highly actionable takeaways that we can extract from Whisper Sweet Nothings. First, we must redefine our understanding of resilience.
Resilience is not the absence of failure or the avoidance of pain. True resilience is a physical and psychological choice. It is the act of walking through the rain, arriving at the interview with a bleeding knee and ruined clothes, and refusing to surrender the opportunity.
Second, regarding the intersection of love and trauma. Genuine connection, whether romantic or familial, demands that we actively interrogate our defensive mechanisms. We must do the grueling work of separating the ghosts of our past abusers from the present realities of our partners. Otherwise, we will inevitably orchestrate the destruction of the very joy we seek to protect.
And finally, the critical importance of environment. We cannot underestimate the sociological impact of our community. Talent and ambition require an incubator. Whether it is a boozy book brunch, a highly communicative group chat, or a fiercely loyal chosen family, we must aggressively seek out the ecosystems that celebrate our growth rather than suppress our potential.
Building on that synthesis, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day. We spend a significant amount of time discussing the Taylor Tea, the anonymous physical newspaper column that acted as the social glue and the panopticon of Rosewood River. I want you to consider how that concept has mutated in our current reality.
We have largely abandoned the physical gossip column, but we have replaced it with massive, anonymous digital town squares.
Platforms like Reddit, specialized Discord servers, or hyperlocal Facebook groups have become our modern Taylor Tea. We are constantly observing, reporting on, and judging the narratives of strangers under the cloak of digital anonymity. Are these digital spaces functioning as true incubators for community and connection, the way the Honey Biscuit Cafe did for Winnie? Or are they simply amplifying our collective anxiety, forcing us into defensive postures where we hide our true selves for fear of anonymous judgment? Take a hard look at the town squares you frequent and ask yourself if they are helping you build your armor, or if they are the reason you feel the need to wear it in the first place. Thank you so much for exploring the depths of this narrative with us today, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.